Thank you so much, Angelo Keely, for coming on Wellness Your Way. I am so excited to be talking with you today.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
Of course. So I've read your formal bio to the audience, but why don't you tell us just in your words how you wound up here today?
I like how open that question is, like how just how'd you get here? I think it
Yes.
probably starts with the family I was born into. My parents were very interested in natural health, specifically, but overall like health and fitness. They had a natural health food store. They had a natural health food restaurant, and my dad had actually been in the supplement business, working with botanicals, things like ginseng in the 70s. And so I was raised without with a minimal amount of kind of like contemporary like Western medicine intervention. Like I didn't go to the
Wow.
doctor, I didn't get prescribed drugs or anything like that. I was raised on whole foods and supplements where they deemed that necessary. And another big part of that was they actually chose to be pescatarians. And so we had a largely vegetarian diet, but then ate fish. And because of that, they taught me a lot about protein nutrition and talked
Wow.
about combining different types of plant proteins to get complete proteins, which I think is probably unusual for most 5-year-olds, to be like really
Yes,
understanding why I need to eat like
absolutely.
my quinoa and my beans together. Um, and yeah, and on top of that, even actually, which we'll get into today, amino acids. Amino acids are one of the first supplements I remember my mom giving me.
Wow.
She was really she was a master swimmer, and kind of like my daycare was going to the gym with her where she trained for the
Yeah.
swimming. And I remember she would give me, when she would take aminos before and after training, she would actually give them to me as well.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's just kind of being raised in a certain set of values, et cetera. And I think just as I aged, I I went through different phases, but I had my own experiences of getting injuries at different time in life and trying to recover from that and finding how important protein and amino acids were, and periods of really trying to, in my late teens, early 20s, like really embrace my own health journey and not just being about like what my parents had taught me, but like how do I thrive? And I just became re-interested, I think, in supplementation and whole food nutrition in a way that, I wasn't when I was like 14, 15. And so when it came time, uh, at kind of a stage in my career, it's got to be 7 years ago now. Um, when you, I think, venture off and try to start your own company and do your own thing, you can try to address some really specific need in the market where you think you're going to find a lot of success because of money, or you can just do something that you're passionate about and love. And this is just one of those things that I've valued most. And I think if you're going to devote your life to something, then do it to something you actually care about.
That is so incredible. I really hope what was the minority when you were growing up, being very immersed in the world of natural health and whole foods and minimal medications and all this stuff. I really hope that will be the majority. I think we're slowly getting there, but I think unfortunately still that would be the minority. And I was raised in a hamburger helper, Pop Tart, like you name it, standard American diet. So I kind of had to chart the path myself and get myself here. I have a little bit of envy, but I'm sure, well, I know for sure that my family had many, many, many amazing aspects to it. So I'm grateful for that as well. But thank you for sharing a little bit of your story. And so you hinted there that you followed your passion. You started a company that was exactly what you loved and what you wanted to share with the world. Tell us a little bit about that company and what it does today, and then we'll go from there.
The company is called Kion. That's Kion. And we primarily do supplements and functional foods that support people really in both a combination of like fitness today, but not like trying to be some competitive athlete, but just really being able to be vibrant and active today in combination with aging well. So, I think longevity is like a buzzword a lot of people throw around, but we really do have that at heart in our mission, and that is how do people live long, fun, active lives? So, like when you're 75, when you're 80, you can still really be physically active and vibrant, not like you were when you were 35, but but more so than maybe all of your peers, that you can really enjoy all the moments of your life. So that's what we're about.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I have been an avid consumer of Kion products since at least 2018. I was trying today to think about when I started, and I can't remember, but I do remember starting somewhere around 2018. So I am certainly a big fan. One of the first products that I remember trying from Kion was the amino acids. Maybe it was your first product. I don't know. But I'd love for you to tell us, first of all, what is an amino acid if listeners are brand new to this topic, and why are they important?
So I think it's often the case that that's one of the first products of ours that someone has tried, because it really is our hero product. Hero product just meaning like the one that we focus the most on, and the one that I think has honestly maybe the greatest impact on people's lives. And
Yeah.
it's really because it's so fundamental to so many aspects of our health. So in our product, there are 9 essential amino acids, and the reason for that is because the 9 essential amino acids are actually the active components of protein, and the reason why we eat protein. So I'm going to kind of now back into like what is an amino acid, from just describing protein and its role in the body, and why it's of interest to us. So out of the 3 macronutrients, protein is distinct from carbohydrates and fat. Carbohydrates and fat, both their primary role is really to be converted into energy in our body that we burn and utilize to move, to think, to perform all of our basic functions. So if you think about it almost like gasoline. Uh, the role of protein is quite different. It can be used in that way, but it actually has to get converted. It has to get converted into a sugar to be used in that way. Instead, the role of protein is more like the building blocks of our body. If you think about, like, it'd be materials you would use to actually like help rebuild your car, not just fuel the car. And the reason why that is because the way that proteins function in our body is that they're actually in a constant state of turnover. And when I say protein, just to make sure people understand generally what I'm talking about, proteins make up over half of the solid mass in our bodies. The parts that aren't water, that are solid, over half of them are made up of proteins. Those are things like our liver, our kidneys, heart, obvious things like our muscle, our skin, our eyes, our hair, but other things that maybe people don't realize, like enzymes, hormones, and proteins actually are the original source of the metabolites of things like neurotransmitters. So the things that perform the activities in our brain that we experience as emotions, et cetera. So proteins are like this really fundamental building block material within our body. And the way that the proteins work in our body is that they really only are good for a certain amount of time. I'm oversimplifying for
Yeah.
just the sake of the audience, but basically a protein has a certain amount of time that it continues to function well, and then it basically needs to be refreshed. And so what it does is that little protein breaks apart into its individual component parts, and those individual component parts are amino acids. So if you think amino acids like the little bricks making up each protein, and when that happens, the ideal is then like, okay, then those amino acids will come back together and rebuild a fresh new protein. But some of those amino acids are no longer useful. They're kind of the older parts of that protein, and they get converted into urea, and we pee them out. And so naturally, what you can just immediately understand is that if a piece of a protein from my heart needs to be refreshed, it gets broken down into these little individual parts, and now some of the parts are missing. Well, I can't just like not rebuild that protein that helps make up my heart. And that's why we eat protein. So when we eat proteins outside of our body, like whether that's plant-based proteins or animal-based proteins, we chew them up, we digest them, they get broken apart into the individual amino acids, they go into the blood, and then they help rebuild all of those proteins throughout our body. And that's whether it's tissue that makes up our heart, or it's muscle, or those proteins get broken down into little metabolites that become our neurotransmitters. That's kind of the big idea of why we eat protein. And at the heart of that, why we really eat amino acids and why those amino acids are so important.
I love that. Let me try to summarize and synthesize for the audience. So Amino acids are building blocks to proteins. Proteins are super important for our body because they are the building blocks for like everything from neurotransmitters to enzymes to organs, etc. Lots of tissues in our body depend on having adequate protein. And then unlike fat and carbohydrates, protein is A, not directly used as an energy source, but B, not stored in the body. So we can break it down, recycle some stuff, and have an amino acid pool in our body, but we cannot store proteins in their whole form. They're constantly turning over. Is that an appropriate summary?
Almost. I'm going to slightly modify that last point you made about that they can't be
Great.
stored. So they actually can be stored, and their primary storage source is muscle.
Mm,
So lots of times people, I didn't just talk about this, but it's such a good segue, Megan.
yeah.
Lots of people think about muscle for reasons of like aesthetics, like, oh, if I, have a six pack or I have tone in my arms, or they think about it functionally for strength. Oh, if I have a lot of muscle, I can lift and push this big thing. And honestly, that second reason, the strength, the maintaining activity, is really, really important as we age. It's something that helps us stay active. And as we age, it becomes harder and harder to maintain that muscle. But another reason that muscle is really, really important as we age, but it's also important if we undergo some type of injury or chronic illness at a younger age, is because it's the one source of amino acids for our body that we can spare. So if suddenly I'm deprived of protein intake and I've got heart tissue that's breaking down, the proteins are breaking down and they need to be rebuilt. It's not like my liver is going to loan a protein to go help rebuild the heart. They're both important. The thing that can be broken down is my muscle. So our lean muscle it's basically like the reservoir of amino acids for the rest of the body in a similar way to the way that excess body fat is a reservoir of energy for the rest of the body. The reason why we store fat is, evolutionarily, or like why you would have fat is if you went through a long period of time where you couldn't eat, where you could burn that fat. The problem now is we eat too much, we store too much fat. But really, storing too much muscle is not a problem that most people have, and that as we age, we definitely want to store a lot more muscle than we probably have aimed to do, because it's directly related to better outcomes from cancer, better outcomes from all different types of chronic illness, related to more activity as we age. It's a crucial reservoir storage facility of amino acids for our body.
Great. And when you're talking about, or when you were talking initially about Kion as promoting a healthy path towards longevity, not just lifespan, but health span, we know that things like sarcopenia, muscle deterioration are really significant in contributing to poor quality of life and or shortened time span of life as people age. So really, really important to have that muscle on your body and to not lose it as we age. You probably know the statistic better than I do, but it's something like after your 50s, you lose 10% of your muscle on average per decade or something like that. It's pretty significant.
Yeah, at age 40, you start losing
40.
1%, but you actually lose strength. I can't remember the exact percentage, something like 8 to
Okay.
10% per year. So the
Yeah.
functional use significantly decreases. That
Mm.
said, overall, the main idea for anyone who's not familiar with the term, sarcopenia just means loss of muscle as you age. And it actually starts as early as 30. And every decade after that, progressively each year, it becomes more and more severe. The reason for that being is at least twofold. One is that our ability to digest proteins becomes diminished. We're simply not as good at actually breaking down the proteins into the individual amino acids. But even more significant is that we're not as sensitive to those amino acids stimulating new protein synthesis and telling our body to build new proteins and being used. Like we have what's called anabolic resistance. There's just resistance to wanting to use the proteins and the amino acids in that way, which I think in the simplest terms, it's like as we get older, your body's not as fresh and young and good at some of these processes that it was when it was younger. And maybe even more significant, or on top of that, is that for women, perimenopausal women, the influx of certain types of hormones and those hormonal changes create an additional stress response that creates even additional anabolic resistance to what a male of the same age would be having. And so it's really important to be thinking about protein intake and building and maintaining muscle before that period of life. But then it's also something that we can focus on during those periods of life to help not have so much muscle loss and strength loss.
Really great points here. So as we age, number one, we lose, what I'm hypothesizing here is we lose proteolytic enzymes or something like that that help break down protein we eat into amino acid that we can use. And then two, we have this anabolic resistance. We cannot combine the amino acids as well to form muscle tissue as we age, especially if we're women in that perimenopausal stage. Is that kind of true?
That's a good summary, yes.
Okay, very good. So you told me before we started recording, so I have a preview of this. Taking essential amino acids helps us combat that second part, which is this anabolic resistance. And maybe this combination helps people build muscle a little bit more effectively in their perimenopausal years. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this is a good time to really be more specific about which amino acids are actually performing these functions and how they work. When we
Okay.
eat a piece of quality protein, and I'll just say eggs, because eggs
Okay.
are a very quality protein. There's 20 dietary amino acids. There's actually other types of amino acids, but there are these 20 dietary amino acids that are used to build proteins in our body. Of those, there are 9 that are the essential amino acids. And they're deemed essential because we must get them from our diet because our body cannot create them, which maybe kind of shocks people. Our body can actually make the other 11. So in consuming those 9 essential, we can synthesize the other 11. We can convert them into actually the other amino acids. Not saying that you would want to force your body to do that. There's a lot of good reasons to just eat the non-essential amino acids on their own. But the 9 essential amino acids are the amino acids also that actually stimulate new protein synthesis. When you consume them, it communicates to the body to start building new proteins and to complete this muscle protein turnover. And so for that reason, they play a really crucial role. So what's interesting is if you take a young adult, if you take, say, a 25-year-old female, and you were to give that person, and we've done studies like this, actually using the, not Kion, but academic research studies, where you give this person the equivalent of the essential amino acids from a piece of red meat versus the essential amino acids plus the non-essential amino acids from a piece of red meat, or only the non-essential amino acids, the 3 different buckets. The
Okay.
essential amino acids create the maximum amount of muscle protein synthesis. The
Wow.
combination of the two create no additional, so it's clear that the EAAs on their own create
Interesting.
all of it, and the non-essential amino acids create none. So what this elucidates is that the essential amino acids are not only the thing that your body can't make, they're the active component. They're the thing in the protein that is not only a building block to help build new tissue, they're the thing that actually conducts the activities and that stimulates the process. So, and if you just take a really high quality whole food protein like egg, steak, chicken, etc., where only about half of it is essential amino acids, less than half, versus a gram of, say, free form essential amino acids. Those free form essential amino acids will generate at least twice the response in muscle protein synthesis as the whole food protein, simply because it's the concentrated form of the active component of the protein. On top of that, though, in studies, it's shown more like in these young adults to be, for example, before resistance exercise, 3 times as much as whey
Wow.
protein. That was that study. So, and the reason for that is because not only is it so much more highly concentrated in the active component, but it also is immediately available to the body. You don't have to
Mm.
digest it, break it down. It just immediately enters the blood and is immediately available to the muscle. So for a young athlete, wow, this is really interesting. If I'm trying to get more out of my exercise, if I'm trying to prevent muscle protein breakdown, build more muscle from the exercise, have reduced muscular fatigue, it's a great supplement. But as we get older, what becomes really interesting is that when you're younger, it's 2 to 3 times the impact. By the time you're age 40, it's more like 3 to 4 the times impact. By the time you're 50, it's 4 to 5 the times impact. And we have studies of
Wow.
people in their 60s where 3 grams of essential amino acids is equal to 20 grams of whey protein. So it's over 6 times the impact. The reason for that being is not like the essential amino acids suddenly became way more effective. It's the protein on its own becomes less effective, again, because
Interesting.
the enzymes are we don't have the same amount and efficacy of the enzymes to break down the protein, and we just overall have more of this resistance to actually stimulate it, which I think
Yeah.
we discussed. Maybe we get into mTOR. There's less sensitivity to stimulate that mTOR pathway, and the essential amino acids help overcome that. So someone who was 25 and they were eating really well and exercising, eat a high protein diet, they get older. By the time they're perimenopausal, it's like, gosh, I'm doing the same activities, but it's like I don't get as much from it. It's true, you don't. Like, you're not getting as much from the protein, and even the resistance exercise is not stimulating as much of the new protein synthesis. And so by supplementing with something like free-form essential amino acids, you help overcome that resistance, and you still can get the amount of muscle protein synthesis you used to get, but it's through adding this additional supplementation that's much more effective than protein. And that honestly even works outside of using it with resistance exercise, which typically people think you have to lift weights to stimulate it, and you actually don't.
Very interesting. I want to hit on a couple things that you said there. That was great. But first, I know that there are so many audience members saying, yes, Angelo gets it. I'm doing the same things. I'm doing it really diligently. I'm following my training plan. I'm eating the same things. I'm eating the same grams of protein, and it's just not the same. And so you're explaining some of this mechanism of action. I know people are super grateful for that and really excited to keep learning more about essential amino acids. So that's really amazing. I'm actually surprised that you don't need resistance training to stimulate muscle synthesis. You only need essential amino acids. I wouldn't have guessed that.
So what I should clarify is that resistance exercise is going to create the best, most impactful stimulus. So in no
Okay.
way am I trying to promote like just stop lifting weights and just take this magic thing in a bottle. That said, free form essential amino acids, there's actually there's a spectrum. So free
Okay.
form essential amino acids being the most impactful. Next would be like an isolate, like a whey protein isolate outside of a mixed meal. Then it would be like a whey
Okay.
protein. Then it would be only consuming protein. And then it would be protein as part of a mixed meal, like you're having steak and potatoes and vegetables.
Got
The
it.
stimulation of muscle protein synthesis from the mixed meal on its own is almost none.
Interesting.
Progressively, all the way up to only taking the free form essential amino acids, it's significant. Like it's measurable in the arterial veins. Like you can tell that it's really happening. So an example of this is actually, I think, a way of thinking about this is not that it's going to match or replace resistance exercise, but it's an excellent supplemental
Compliment.
behavior even. So on days when you're not doing resistance exercise, honestly, if you take it with resistance exercise, it amplifies the amount of muscle protein synthesis. But even on days when you're not, you still are stimulating the muscle protein synthesis to help maintain the muscle. And a great example of this is studies for NASA that were done it's a little over 15 years ago now, where they were trying to figure out specifically how to solve this problem. We have astronauts in space for an extended amount of time that cannot really train resistance exercise. There's no gravity, right? So lifting and pushing and pulling is hard. Is
Right.
there some type of nutritional approach that we can take to help overcome this? So what they did is they did a study where they kept participants at 28-day bed rest. So they had numerous participants laying in a bed for 28 days, no movement, no activity. They
Wow.
consumed a regular diet of a few meals per day, and then they took free form essential amino acids, yeah, basically 15 grams at a time, which is quite a bit. But
A
honestly,
lot.
if you're older or you're perimenopausal or you're overcoming from some type of surgery, it's a normal, it's actually a thoughtful dose to take. They were taking that
Okay.
6 times a day. Now that's a lot.
Yeah.
But after 28 days, there was no net muscle loss. These people
Wow.
had no resistance training, no walking, no moving, nothing. They were able to maintain all of their muscle. Now they lost strength and they
Yeah.
lost function, which is
Yeah.
natural. I mean, it's like you would assume like you're not lifting or moving things, but
Yeah.
they did not lose the actual muscle mass. And so that's just a very clear kind of more human outcome study, not just a mechanistic study that helps you see and understand that free form essential amino acids on their own can actually stimulate muscle protein synthesis to avoid loss of muscle mass. So if we're getting really practical about this with someone again who's perimenopausal, I mean, keep eating a good diet, keep
Yep.
trying to do resistance training, and
Yep.
add this thing, and you can help overcome some of the reduction in efficacy of what those really positive behaviors used to produce.
I love that. I have to say, I personally only use the Kion aminos surrounding workouts. And
Mm.
in learning more about you and preparing for this interview and some of the research that you've shared, I've become more excited about using them maybe like in the afternoon. Just I work out in the morning always. So maybe in the afternoon, just instead of a snack for an energy boost, or gosh, I really hope I'm never on bed rest for 28 days. But if I were, or if I had an injury and I wasn't able to strength train or something like that, I am becoming more and more convinced that that's a great use for them. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. People always be like, "Can you use it when you're not exercising?" And I'm like, "Well, it's excellent for exercise because
Yeah.
they 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 uh, they amplify each other. The resistance
Right.
training, or even just cardio training combined with
Yeah.
amino acids, amplify the results. But on days when you're not training, another great reason to take them because you can still actually stimulate that muscle protein synthesis outside of a day when you're doing the resistance training.
Really interesting.
Mhm.
So now check me on this because I'm going back to the mixed meal and you saying the free form aminos are best, and then all the way down to the mixed meal. What I have always counseled clients is it's going to be better or more effective if you take your aminos not with a mixed meal, not with, don't just like top off your salad with chicken with a scoop of aminos. You're going to get less benefit as opposed to if you take it on its own. Does that hold up or no?
So I actually used to have a very similar perspective, and
Okay.
there's a really great research that came out in 2020. I think David Church is the primary author on it that has helped change my perspective on this, and I think the whole
Good.
community around EAAs. And
Okay.
it's this. So when you consume protein, your body goes through a process of utilizing that protein for a few hours to do new protein synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that period, after you've digested the protein and it's not available, and now you're technically in a fasted state, you're in that position where there aren't new proteins available to the body. And so you do go into net muscle protein breakdown. You start breaking down some, and you don't have to get worried about it, but you start breaking down
Just
some little bit
teeny.
of muscle to help support the rest of the body with its need for amino acids. So the idea of consuming essential amino acids outside of a meal period to help overcome that. For example, if you're really into doing intermittent fasting because you just like feeling kind of like lighter, or you feel like you may be more focused, but you don't want to have the negative benefits of losing muscle mass, which, if you're 25 and you're eat a lot of food and you're a competitive athlete, like, you don't need to worry about it. If you're like perimenopausal, I would say, like, I would not do that because you're
I
already got
agree.
all this other anabolic resistance. So during
Yes.
those periods, it makes a lot of sense to prioritize taking something like Kion aminos like mid-afternoon,
Okay.
especially if you're not having some other type of high protein snack. So yeah, you get the benefit, an even greater benefit in some ways than what you would get from whole food protein by taking Kion aminos during those periods. That said, because in the mixed meal, you're going to use all the, I think we're getting into a lot of nuance here. So
Okay.
there's not like a
You
right
can pull
or
me
a
back
wrong.
up.
Yeah, no, it's good. But because in the mixed meal, you're not really communicating to the body like, hey, utilize all this, and especially utilize it to prioritize maintaining my muscle. If you were to take essential amino acids right at the time that you eat your meal, you would actually kickstart this process of muscle protein synthesis that you would not get from the chicken.
Interesting.
And then the
Okay.
chicken, by the time it takes to digest the chicken, it would be better utilized and prioritized towards muscle building. And a lot of this insight has actually come through directly talking to people like Dr. Arnie Ferrando, who's been one of the leaders in all this research study, and him just trying to help me like understand it and break it down. Because it's like, should you be prioritizing it in this case or that case? They're honestly like both, they're both good cases.
Okay.
That said, like, I don't know about drinking essential amino acids all day long in everything that you do. So I think it's kind of like, I tend to take a more minimal approach, and so I tend to think about it, utilize it during fasting periods, utilize it while in combination with exercise.
Yep.
That said, if you're gonna, maybe here's another good example of like a good middle ground. If you're gonna choose to drink something else during that period that's not water when you're eating, like, oh, I want a glass of wine or alcohol or a diet soda or something like that, that really does not have nutritional value and
Yeah.
potentially has a toxic impact on the body, choosing
Yeah.
instead to replace it with something like a fruit flavored essential amino acid beverage, it's actually going to make the protein more useful. Well, that's a great solution.
Love it.
If you were just going to drink water with some lime in it, I mean, that's a great solution too. So there's benefit to both.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Yes. I'm not about to go recommending that everyone consumes 25 scoops of Kion aminos per day and stops eating any source of dietary protein. I love your product, but not quite that much. I think we still need to eat a balanced diet. I am going to continue using it for myself, primarily around exercise, because honestly, I love the way it feels. I love the way it's worked for me. But I'm going to add, if I just kind of need a little pick me up in the afternoon, or if I am fasting, which I don't do a ton of, but sometimes I will take some additional aminos, and I might even experiment with it around a mixed meal just for the sake of it, because I love experimenting with this stuff. So
It
thank you
definitely
for,
causes it definitely causes no harm. And
okay.
not to endorse taking this much, but recent kind of position stand came out on this that reviewed all of the literature, the International Society of Sports Nutrition, and up to 20 servings a day
Oh my
are
goodness.
deemed as safe. Now that's a lot, and I think that might be, again, I think that anyone who would consider consuming that much, I think it'd be more in the case of like, yeah, you're battling some type of illness and you're
Yeah.
really trying to maintain muscle mass during that period, or you've had an injury
Right.
and you can't work out, or things like that. But yeah, you actually, it's deemed safe up to like pretty high amounts.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Interesting studies to be looking into. So let's kind of talk about your recommendations then. We know up to 20 is safe. We know I'm probably on the lower end. You say you take the minimal approach. How do people think about it? Let's say it's someone who's like, oh my gosh, Megan told me to eat this number of grams of protein, and I'm really struggling to get that number of grams of protein. How do they think about working Kion aminos into their day and like counting it as protein? What would you advise on that?
So I think it can be counted towards protein if you think about protein ultimately as its essential amino acid content,
Great.
and you ensure that you're hitting like at least the RDA, the recommended daily allowance in terms of protein. Because what I will
Which is
name,
low.
which is pretty low, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll get to that in a second, like what this would look like, just because eating whole food proteins have more than just the protein in it, right? There's other
Yes.
minerals, there's vitamins, there's healthy fats. And so you want to be eating whole foods. So in that
Yes.
context, now I'll explain like maybe how you could choose to supplement a daily amount of it that might work for you.
Great.
So the recommended daily allowance is around zero point 0.4 grams per pound of body weight. So for simple math, if you weighed 100 pounds, which very few people weigh that, but it's easy math, that'd be 40 grams of protein per day.
Okay.
That is very low. And I would say that recommended daily allowance is established more to ensure that you have healthy organ, like just basic organ function. Your hair doesn't start falling out. Like we talked about all the things that proteins and amino acids do. Like that's the basic for that. And there's also lots of healthy minerals and fats, et cetera, that you'll get with eating these whole food proteins. Once you go beyond that and you start thinking, okay, well, what's like an optimal daily intake? a more there's a consensus around this with a large part of nutritionists, although it's not everyone, is to aim more for something like 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you're a
Love it.
100 pound person, that would be 100 grams of protein per day. If you were a 150 pound person, that'd be 150 grams of protein per day. So in that way, I think then for most people, what's going to work is going to be to divide that up into a few meals. And
Yes.
that those can be more complete meals, those can be snacks, etc. So let's just go with the 150 grams because I think that's more it's a more general range for most people between males and females. So in 150 grams, let's just say that that's five doses of protein per day, each one being about 30 grams. So if you could have 30 grams for breakfast, and then you could have another 30 gram snack, and you could have 30 grams for lunch, and 30 grams as a snack in the afternoon, and then 30 grams for dinner. Boom, you just hit it. You hit that amount. I think for some people though that feels hard. It's like, God, that's a lot of 30 grams of
Yeah.
protein to eat. So one way of thinking about it is that each one of those 30 grams is really corresponding to 15 grams of essential amino acids, right?
Great.
That
Yep.
said, though, what we said earlier and that we know is that for someone in their 40s or 50s, that really like 3 grams of essential amino acids are equal to almost like 20 grams of protein.
Wow.
So you could think like 1 to 2 scoops of Kion aminos during one of those periods, which is technically only 5 to 10 grams of essential amino acids, is actually going to be closer to the equivalent of 30 to 40 grams of
Wow.
protein in terms of its effect on you. So if it feels hard to okay, I can eat 3 meals a day with 30 grams of protein, but those snacks are kind of like hard to get in,
Yes.
that could be a time where you take 1 scoop or 2 scoops of Kion aminos, and you're getting an equivalent in terms of the muscle protein synthesis and whole body protein synthesis that you would be getting from a high protein snack during that time period. And if you're
I
just
love
not
it.
hungry, that might be an easier way to get it in. Similarly, if you pair it with exercise, and you can take Kion aminos before, during, and after exercise, there's benefits to each one. They're all really good. We could nerd out on it, but I would just say like whatever works best for you. If you want it more for the energy and the endurance, you take it before. If you're like really motivated by the recovery, you can take it after. You get the most benefits in terms of muscle by taking it before. And
I'm before. I've
yeah,
always been before. I will continue to be before.
okay, yeah, you get the most amount of muscle benefits, both reducing
Okay.
fatigue and getting the most amount of muscle protein synthesis and ultimately functional muscle from taking it before. Then like
Great.
that's a great time because lots of times people like to work out fasted or not like really full,
Yeah.
and you'll notice if you drink it, then it satiates you and it gives you
Yes.
energy and it can count
Yes.
towards those higher upper limits of protein that people would be aiming for in like a more optimized diet. So did that answer the question?
That was perfect. I know people are relieved. So we're recommending at least hit the RDA, which is zero point 0.4 grams per pound of body weight in food. And then if you're trying to go for these higher levels, you can use 1 to 2 scoops of Kion aminos as one of your quote snacks or in between meals in order to supplement. It's impossible to do the math precisely for every single person, but maybe 20 to 30 grams ish towards your count. You can use aminos for that. Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. I love it. So I only have a couple of questions left for you. You've really been touching on this a lot throughout, whether people realize it or not, but everyone's concerned about metabolism and fat loss and all of this. So can you tell us about how essential amino acids can support these processes in our body?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to just highlight and explain is that all of us have a resting metabolic rate. If I just lie down all day long and don't perform any activities, I don't walk, I don't move in any way, I'm literally just going to burn a certain amount of calories. And that's because literally my body needs energy to breathe, to just stay alive overall, to beat
Yeah.
my heart, etc. And then when I move, I burn even more calories naturally, right? Because it's more energy intensive. So if someone's just lying down and they have more muscle than they used to have, they will burn more calories doing nothing. The
Yeah.
reason why they will burn more calories doing nothing, and this could be like if like they weighed 150 pounds, but beforehand, and then they replaced 5 pounds of that fat that was on their body with 5 pounds of muscle. So they weigh the exact same amount, but there's more
Yep.
muscle that makes it up. They will burn more calories, and that's
Yeah.
because hopefully this will make sense from all the conversation we've had thus far. The proteins in your body are constantly turning over.
Yeah.
And so when you just have fat, the fat's not constantly being turned over. It's just a stored energy source. The
Right.
protein, though, has to break down, be rebuilt, break down, be rebuilt. That is an energy intensive process. And so, literally, the protein requires calories to simply maintain it. The fat does not in the same way. So
Yes.
that alone, you're going to burn more calories. Now, if I get up and I start moving around and I have more muscle, I have more muscle tissue that is doing that activity. All of
Yeah.
it requires more calories. All of it requires more energy. So when I'm active, then I'm going to burn even more calories. So big premise idea is that having more muscle in your body will overall make you have a higher metabolism, because whether you're lying down or you're moving, you're going to be burning more calories. Now,
Yeah.
as this relates to consuming protein or amino acids, when you eat a whole food protein, there's energy that's required to just break it down into the amino acids. And then when you take those amino acids, as we discussed earlier, they help rebuild new proteins. That is a more energy intensive process than carbohydrates or fat.
Yeah.
So while fat is about 9 calories per gram, it's much more calorically dense. That's why we have excess body fat, because it's a really good storage way of like containing a lot of energy and calories. Whereas carbs are only about 4 calories per gram. Protein's also about 4 calories per gram, but because it requires 15 to 30% more energy to utilize it, it ends up equating more to like 3 calories per gram, because you use a lot of the energy to simply to utilize the protein in a way that you don't
Right.
for the carbs. So essential amino acids have that same principle, that they stimulate this muscle protein synthesis, and thus they increase your overall metabolism. But because, again, they don't require digestion, they're immediately available into blood, they spike that muscle protein synthesis even more, and they're even more calorically efficient. So when you consume essential amino acids, you're increasing your overall metabolism because you're telling the body to build new proteins. But on top of that, you're also investing in long term having more lean muscle instead of fat, which overall is going to increase your metabolism long term. What I would say though is, like, big picture is like, I wouldn't think about this as like I'm going to consume this thing and like lose a bunch of fat. It's like, this is about, I think, choosing longer term healthy habits that
Yes.
help you maintain overall long-term health. That overall, like, if you can see yourself a little bit further into the future, and rather than trying to make short-term decisions that are just going to affect this change really quickly, these are the things that will make sustainable lower fat body percentage,
Yeah.
sustainable more lean muscle, and thinking about it as something that you invest in over time, versus like, I'm gonna take a fat burner and it's gonna
Right.
make me really hot, or like a
Yeah.
stimulant or something like that. It's a more um, thoughtful, sustainable thing that we're investing in when we think about amino acids in terms of metabolism.
I love that. And honestly, I would say, even in terms of workout, I've recommended Kion Aminos to many people who are like, oh man, right away, I felt an energy boost. But I like to preempt it by saying, it's not like you're chugging 5 Red Bulls. You're not supposed to be feeling like you're bouncing off the walls. For me, it's much more of a gentle, like you said, it takes the edge off my hunger. I feel confident that I'm not catabolizing muscle, and in fact, giving myself the fuel to build muscle during my workout. I do feel a gentle energy boost and increase in endurance and things like that, but it's not like the craziest thing ever in the moment. I'm thinking of it much more for the long-term benefits, which is really why I'm in this whole health thing to begin with. I don't really care about the moment to moment. I care about the long term.
I'm
Yes.
aligned.
Okay. Very aligned. Very good.
Yeah.
So let's close it out. I know people are going to be really excited to try Kion Aminos, and I'm going to share a link in the show notes where they can get Aminos at a little discount. But I'd love just to hear from you in closing. What's one or two additional things that have nothing to do with amino acids that are really important to you and your health routine?
Family is the first thing that comes up. Like I just love my family, and I've been
Love it.
reflecting on it. I've been reflecting on it lately, like when I have a really cool work environment. I mean, getting to build my work environment and all the people that I work with and like build a team I
Yeah.
like working with, it's pretty awesome. And like it's work and it's business. It can be stressful when I go home to my family, and they are just really cool, thoughtful. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old and a wife,
Wow.
and they all are just really, I feel like, invested in their emotional health and um, trying to be like healthy and happy and vulnerable and share what's going on with themselves and be real and getting to
Amazing.
have that kind of relationship. It's probably, I mean, it's one of the greatest stress reducers in my life and just overall
Wow.
balances me. So I think, yeah, I'm just, I think
That's a great
investing,
answer.
yeah, that's definitely the number one. And then number two is, it is just movement. You know, I've gone through
Yeah.
all different phases of movement, from running to yoga to intense resistance training to just lots of walking. And I think anytime I'm feeling not good,
Yeah.
unless I like really just need to rest, in
Yeah.
many cases, some form of movement is just,
Yeah.
it can shift things and move things around and unlock it and provide me with a way to see through whatever I'm struggling with.
Oh, I love it. Family, movement, and amino acids, a perfect combination for life. So great. Well, like I said, we'll include the link to Kion below where people can check out aminos and all the other products. But if listeners are curious to learn more, where would you like to direct them?
I would just check out Kion. Yeah, we're on Instagram, Kion. You can go to our website, go to the link that Megan's offering, and also, if at any time you have more questions, you can call us. So we have live phone support Monday through Friday, like 9 to 5, and awesome team, super knowledgeable group of people. So just call us, ask us questions.
That is so cool. It's a rarity these days to actually have real people doing customer service. So that's incredible. Listeners, I know you enjoyed the interview with Angelo today. I know you learned a ton. I'm a big fan of Kion Aminos, and you know I wouldn't say that unless I actually had been using it for a while. So, Angelo, one more time, thank you so much for coming on Wellness Your Way. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Megan.